The Timeshift.
Hello and welcome, I'm Chris Hall and this is The Timeshift, my sci-fi fun fest, and it's great to have you with me as always. Now you may have noticed something's a little bit off, something's a little bit strange, something's not quite as it was last time. Yes, that's right, I've had a shave. No, okay, I've been silly. Yes, I've had a haircut. Yes, I've not done a time shift in a good couple of weeks. The two things are connected. Past couple of weeks I've had some really important job interviews and I've been busy with doing radio stuff, so I've not had time to do a time shift in quite a while. And it is kind of odd that I've not had time to do a time shift when most of the time shifts themselves are revolving around time travel. Some kind of sense of irony there, but whatever, I'm just going to stop pontificating so we can actually get down to the business at hand. Now this week's video is about Doctor Who, about Season 8 of Doctor Who. Now this is my final episode on Series 8, you'll be pleased to know. It is my overview of the entire series as a whole. I've done my favourite episodes of this series, I've done my least favourite episodes of this series. Now I'm looking at it as a whole rainbow of wibbly wobbly timey wimey thing stuff. Now needless to say, because I'm looking at the series as a whole, this video is going to be spoiler heavy. So if you don't want this video, or this series rather, spoiled, it's probably best that you switch the video off now. Okay, everybody ready, everybody geared up, let's get down to the business at hand. Doctor Who Series 8, the overview. Feels weird doing the overview at the start of a video, it honestly does. But in any case, as always, notes here, drink here, we'll refer to both of them as the video goes on. Because I need my drink to stop myself from going dry in the throat. My throat is a tool. I am in many regards like the Dragonborn from Skyrim. My throat is a mighty, powerful weapon that must be looked after at all times. And of course my notes to help me not to go off on a tangent too much. Now, we'll begin by saying that I found this series as a whole to be mixed. Just incredibly mixed from start to finish. Not just in the quality of certain episodes, but also in the tone. In terms of quality, the fact that I could fill an equal list of entries on both the best episodes of this series and the worst episodes of this series isn't a coincidence. I didn't do that simply because it made sense from a writing standpoint. I did that because looking through this series as a whole, there's been an equal amount of great episodes as there's been terrible episodes. Episodes which, I'll be honest, and I put my hands up and say, some of my favourite episodes probably of Doctor Who ever have been in this series and have been great and fantastic. Even if they've not been as good as some of my favourite all-time episodes of Doctor Who, they've certainly been up there, or at least been so good you can say that these equal or surpass some classic stories in Doctor Who. The worst episodes, however, have been episodes which have got me very angry and have made me consider even continuing to watch Doctor Who at all. I've already talked enough about those episodes, I'm not going to dwell on them too much. I probably would cut off on a tangent in a moment and then start ranting and raving about how evil Kill the Moon was. Now, like I say, at the absolute best, we've had episodes which, you know, there are people out there who have not watched Doctor Who, only kind of know it as a name, they've never really had much time to watch it. We all know someone, a friend of ours, who's been meaning to start watching Doctor Who but simply hasn't had the time for it, what reason or another. Usually it's because they've been watching The X Factor, which, you know, if anyone chooses to watch The X Factor over Doctor Who, I think it's time to reconsider them as friends. But in any case, if you wanted to say, look, you want to watch Doctor Who, we've got a free afternoon, I've got a subscription for generic internet, television streaming service, let's watch some Doctor Who. You can pick out easily 3 episodes from this series and say, this is what Doctor Who is, this is what it's about, this is your typical episode, this is the basic tone, enjoy. You can easily do that. If you want an example of a light and happy episode of Doctor Who, then you go for Robot of Sherwood. If you want a darker episode, you go for Dark Water or Listen. If you want an episode which is kind of in between, then you go for Flatline. And that would be perfect sentiment. Something you could easily turn to someone and say, this is what Doctor Who is. Enjoy. Watch. We'll watch them together. If you have any questions about continuity, ask me. I know I'm an expert. That kind of thing. But conversely, if that's even the right word, we've had episodes which, to a certain degree, do certainly feel borderline parody of what Doctor Who is. At absolute worst, Doctor Who can be incredibly melodramatic, with some horribly wooden delivery by certain actors within it, have morals that feel incredibly forced and laboured, make no sense either in terms of science or indeed common sense as a whole, and at absolute definite worst can hold a near sense of contempt for the audience of home. And we've had those episodes during this series, episodes which are found troubling and aggravating, not necessarily from a moral standpoint or a social political standpoint, but certainly from a writing one. The kiss during Deep Breath I've always found aggravating from a writing standpoint. I know there's some stupid morons out there who take offence to it because it's a same-sex kiss. I know there's people out there who find it aggravating, and those kind of people, let's be honest, we shouldn't really dwell on or give them much airtime, so let's just move away from that. But you've also got instances like the episode Kill the Moon, which itself, towards the start of the episode, sets some very basic rules as to what will happen either way with their moral dilemma. Either it will lead to the destruction of the planet Earth, or alternatively you'll kill the one and only of its species. You can either do either of these, but you can't do both. And then when they choose the kill the Earth option, Earth doesn't die, it makes no sense. And I'm not going to dwell on either of those anymore, because if I do, I'm going to start ranting again. But yeah, it's basic stuff like that. It's stuff about not following rules, or stuff about not treating your audience with respect, or thinking that they could comprehend certain relationships or not, when by and large we can. We're willing to go with it, which sadly makes it feel as though the writers are just looking at us like, yeah, they don't get it. It's too subtle for them, bigger, we need it bigger, we need it more in their face, otherwise they're not going to get it. This character is an ex-soldier with a troubled past. Show him with a tear rolling down his face to prove that it's a difficult subject for him to talk about. Yeah! Which you'd never needed, once again, when you had I think it was the caretaker, I honestly don't remember. It's episode that we first get introduced to Mr. Pink, when the little kid is talking to him about his time as a soldier, and he asks him if he ever killed anybody, and if he ever killed anybody unintentionally. We then have the tear rolling down the side of the cheek. Didn't need that. The pauses in the conversation were enough to signify that there was issues for him. I'm starting to talk about episodes again, which I said I wouldn't do, so we'll move on. I need some kind of a jeopardy to this to stop me from getting off subject, like an electric buzzer, or like I'm a celebrity, just have loads of bugs and cockroaches and stuff land on my head if I get off subject. But whatever. Going back to actually the subject at hand. Like I say, the problem with this series has been it's been 50-50, but not just in the quality of the episodes, but also tonally. We've had episodes which have been incredibly light and boisterous and very family friendly in some regard or another, like Robot Hood, which I stand up and say is probably one of the best light episodes of Doctor Who we've had. But also then, seemingly, I think it was even the following week, we had Listen, which was, until we got to Dark Water, the darkest episode of this series. And I just find that bizarre. I honestly do. How we can go from light episodes to dark episodes. And then from Listen, we had Kill the Moon, which, had that not been terrible, that would still be an incredibly dark episode. So you got two very dark episodes back to back. Then you've got a light one with Mummy on the Express. Then you've got a dark one with Flatline. A light one with In the Forest of the Night. Dark one with Dark Water. It just feels incredibly difficult. which I find horrible in some regard for this run of Doctor Who, in that it doesn't feel like the vision of a singular person, that everyone who is contributing scripts and stories to it has a very, very different idea as to what Doctor Who is or should be. Now, this may be in part due to the fact that some of the episodes that were written originally for Matt Smith, so naturally, tonally, it's not going to make much sense with Peter Capaldi's more darker Doctor. I believe that In the Forest of the Night was originally going to be a Matt Smith one. Even Deep Breath, I think, was supposed to be a Matt Smith one at one point, but of course, because he left to be in Terminator Genesis, by the looks of things, he's not going to regret that decision at all. And it's back, he left it, so some of the episodes have been modified and rewritten, but still, I find it odd. Doctor Who as a whole entity, going from the tone, many of the episodes seems to be going in a darker direction. So to have such episodes which are very light and to some degree superfluous, like In the Forest of the Night, feels odd. Having an episode which feels like a CBBC show to having a fairly dark episode doesn't quite make sense. They need to find a tone, a singular tone, and stick to it. Have a meeting of all the contributors and say, this is the direction we're going in with Doctor Who now. We're not going to do this. We're going to be doing this. No more of that. We ain't going to do this. And we certainly aren't going to do that anymore. But we're going to do this, this and this. Or say, right, we're going to go light from now on. It's going to be a family tea time show. Or it's going to be a slightly darker show. Or whatever. They need to have a sit-down conversation about it. One of the reasons why I am adamant that Russell T Davies' first series of Doctor Who was fantastic, and how every other subsequent series has been, I'll be honest, not as good, was because that first series was a singular vision with a singular goal in mind. It was reintroducing us to Doctor Who, showing us old bad guys and old monsters, as well as providing us with stories and creatures which could relate themselves to modern day issues and topics of the day. Lest we forget, one of the episodes, it's very clear that it's satirising the weapons of mass destruction speech by Tony Blair. And even if the episodes themselves didn't have that same level of socio-political satire to them, there was still a purpose behind them. Usually it was just an exploration of the Doctor Who mythology, explaining who the Doctor was, where he came from, what the TARDIS is, and what the role of the companion is. Doing these things and covering these topics in ways and means which had never really been done before. And granted, this was the first series of a new run of Doctor Who, so we had to have that explanation and a deconstruction just for the simple fact that we had new viewers coming into it. But it was done in ways and means that didn't make it feel like exposition. They didn't make it seem as though, alright, we're going to say exactly who everyone is and what their motivation is. It let us, the audience, explore and look at them in new and interesting ways, whilst at the same time creating new monsters and bad guys for the Doctor to fight and to go against, creating new dilemmas which had never been done before. The idea that the Doctor killed his species, he destroyed the Time Lords to defeat the Daleks, was a great idea. And to a certain degree, I am very annoyed that that isn't the case anymore, as it just turns out, oh, they're trapped in an alternate dimension somewhere. But whatever, that's something else we can discuss at a later date. Of course, the fact that the entire series had a singular point to it, had effectively a single writer behind it, made it that little bit more focused and a little bit more coherent. Of course, subsequently as time went by, we had new writers coming into it as either guest contributors or writing whole episodes themselves, which was great, and some of the episodes that subsequently have been good. We wouldn't have Stephen Moffat if it weren't for the fact of having guest written episodes, but we've got it to a point now in which we have people where it is literally, to a certain degree, as though we're listening to a bunch of people in one room shouting at each other. Everyone has these very different visions as to what Doctor Who is and what Doctor Who should be. You've got people that want it to be light and family friendly, people that want it to be dark and brooding, people that want it to be socially satirical. You can't really do all these things in one, so sooner or later they're going to have a sit down conversation and they're going to have to say, this is what we want Doctor Who to be now. We want it to be dark, or we want it to be family friendly, or we want it to be satirical. You can't do all of them, because as has been demonstrated by this series, it just makes the entire series as a whole feel very tonally difficult. Even if every episode in this series had been good, had been great, or at least been passably average, the tone between each of those episodes would still be off. We still would have dark episodes and light episodes put together, but in ways which it is literally like just staring down a zebra crossing. White, black, white, black, white, black. With no in-between point, no grade, no tonal shift, just snap decisions, which feels odd as a consumer and odd as a watcher. There's one moment which I've not actually discussed at all from this series of Doctor Who, and it comes from the first episode of this series, and is the cameo appearance by Matt Smith. Now, the reason why I didn't discuss it at the time was purely and simply because it felt like an end of series moment. It felt like the kind of thing that I would have to save till the end of the series, due to the fact that if I mentioned it there and then, it would be major huge spoilers, and B, I didn't want to get too angry and ranty too soon, even though I did in that episode anyway. That's besides the point. I have such difficulty with that cameo appearance that you wouldn't believe. And even waiting until now, I still can't find the words to properly describe just how dumbfounding it makes me feel. The whole thing, the whole concept of a previous Doctor having a cameo appearance in a recently regenerated Doctor's episode feels odd. Oh, so very odd. And it just smacks of a sheer disrespect to everybody involved in the show, including the audience at home. Lest we forget, this is also an episode in which we need a same-sex couple to remind us that they are in a relationship. Otherwise, we'd forget, or we wouldn't believe it, even though we do remember and we do believe it, because they are a relationship. It is not for any discussion they're in a relationship. We can accept that. We're okay with it. Once again, still some arseholes that can't accept that, but forget them. They don't need bothering with at all. But then to have the fact that we, the audience, then need the previous Doctor to come on to say, don't worry everybody, he's still me, he's definitely the Doctor, before Peter Capaldi can even do his generic I am the Doctor speech, which thankfully he kind of left until Flatline, at which point it was very good and very apt, rather than the usual seemingly every other episode reminder from David Tennant that he was the bloody Doctor. But whatever, getting distracted again, Gungeon stuff falling from the ceiling. But I just, once again, it feels incredibly disrespectful of everybody. And yes, I did lead in to move the mouse to get the notes back on screen, but it does feel disrespectful. It feels disrespectful once again to us, the audience, who we wouldn't be able to comprehend an actor of Capaldi's age playing the Doctor, even though when he started Doctor Who, he was of the same age that William Hartnell was when he started Doctor Who. So there's already precedent for it, so that's not new within the whole structure of the show itself. He's a great actor, so we don't need any convincing that he was going to play the Doctor any less good than previous ones, because he wouldn't be around for this one if he wasn't good. And he is good. You see him in pretty much any other TV show or any movie that he's been great. So from that standpoint, makes no sense. So why do we need to be reassured that he's the right choice? Because let us be honest, the whole reason why he is the Doctor is mostly due to the fact that everyone joking around the time that Matt Smith was Doctor Who, that, oh yeah, they should have Peter Capaldi, you know, the guy from the thick of it who's always swearing. Could you imagine that? Then spin the clock forward a few years and, oh, he's the Doctor now. Oh, bollocks, our joke kind of backfired. But it didn't quite backfire because he is great and fantastic. So they have no confidence within Peter Capaldi being the Doctor. They have no confidence that us, the audience, will accept Peter Capaldi being the Doctor. There has no confidence within the casting people, thinking that the idea of casting someone who isn't fangirl material, that's a disaster waiting to happen. We need the classic fangirl pleasing Doctor to come on and say, don't worry everybody, he's still me. Look, I could probably rant and rave about this for way too long than is necessary, but once again, I don't understand why it's necessary. Or if you ever wanted to just do a simple I am the Doctor speech, then just give him an I am the Doctor speech. That's usually enough for most people. For me, it kind of requires a little bit more from that. It requires acting chops. It requires some serious gravitas and performing credits to actually prove that someone is the Doctor. Having someone say they are the Doctor in a long-winded speech with the dun 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 music in the background really doesn't do it for me. And thankfully the only time we had a I am the Doctor speech was during Flatline, and it was at a moment which felt incredibly apt, as the Doctor was fighting a monster that he didn't know or understand. So him declaring himself I am the Doctor then kind of made it more sense, both dramatically and thematically and character-wise. Look, just as a way to summarise and to overview the overview, once again, this series of Doctor Who was incredibly 50-50. Within it, there are some utterly fantastic episodes and some utterly tripe episodes. There have been moments which have made me want to pull my hair out with anger, and moments which have made me glad to be a fan of Doctor Who. But what about you? What do you think? What have been your highlights of this series of Doctor Who? What have been your low points? What have you enjoyed? What have you hated? Which is exactly what I just said, but whatever. If you have any questions for me on just about anything, let me know in the comment section below, and I shall probably get back to you at a future date and a future video at some point or another. There isn't going to be any more Doctor Who time shifts until the Christmas special, he says, bearing in mind he only planned to do the one Series 8 review video, but I know he's done 3, but whatever, just take that with a pinch of salt. But I will get back to you at some point, either in a video or just in the comment section, so if you have anything to say, just comment section. I have nothing else to say. I've been recording this for about an hour and a half. Goodbye.